Very pleasant good morning. After that fine session, and last you met with that agreement, I've come with a special step this morning. I hope that we'll be able to do more of those, that the discipline and the dignity and the decorum of the house will be maintained. So I went in my book room and I picked out an old reader. Some of you who are nearly as old as I am will remember that there was a book called The Royal Reader. And from the grade 5 volume, I was surprised it kept so well. Excelsior. The shades of night were falling fast, as through an alpine village passed a youth who bore amid snow and ice a banner with the strange device, Excelsior. So go a little higher. Go a little higher in your debates, a little higher in your contributions. So from the good book of Psalms 105 I read, God sent a man before them, even Joseph, who was sold for a servant, whose feet they hurt with fetters, he was laid in iron, until the time that his word came. The word of the Lord tried him. The king sent and loosed him, even the ruler of the people, and let him go free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his substance. And here's the line: to bind his princes at his pleasure and teach his senators wisdom. One of the finest summary of the life of Joseph can be found anywhere. It's right there in the book of Psalms. Let us pray. Gracious God and our Heavenly Father, we bow humbly to thank you for this land that you've given to us as our home. Oh God, bless this Commonwealth today in all its projects, in all its auxiliaries. Remember the Governor General, the Prime Minister, our leader of the opposition, and all those, dear Lord, whom you've chosen to lead your people at this time. And bless those in authority in other places. Bless the students as they go through the long, hot summer. Bless them in their camps, in their vacation Bible schools, in their summer schools, and bless their directors and instructors. This will be a good summer for all of them. We thank you for your blessings in the past, and we encourage our Father to know that that which you have begun, you are well able to complete. So bless your people today, and bless our land. We humbly pray in the name of Jesus, who taught us to pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
K. Dorfus, Dr. Johnson, Emma Hakitas, H. Strawn, D. Gomez, K. Rose, Dr. Minnis, D. Smith, C. Hamilton, R. Wells, A. Moss, N. Grant, L. Butler Turner, E. Keith, L. Miller, P. Turnquest, Dr. Rollins, R. Lightburn, C. Forbes, A. Forbes, H. Chipman, G. Moss, T. Neely, R. Curry.
Good morning, honorable members. Today is the 23rd day of July in the year of our Lord 2014. I wish to welcome each and every one of you to a new sitting of this honorable house. Firstly, I'd like to just remind all members, and particularly those in the gallery, to turn your phones in the off or vibrate position. Secondly, I want to apologize for our tardiness this morning. And we will follow the usual agenda, order of business, but before we do, the chair just has a brief intervention followed by condolences. Firstly, the chair would like to congratulate the organizers of the Peace on the Streets basketball organization and classic, which was held just last weekend, or culminated last weekend, with a series of events that I thought was very successful. There was good participation by members of the public, and Apostle Carlos Reed and his team ought to be commended for the work they're doing with youth against violence. One of the more important events, I would say, that culminated the Peace on the Street basketball tournament is, or was, the celebrity basketball game between the Defense Force officers combined with the police officers versus the pastors and politicians. The pastors and politicians won the first half in a close margin, but ended up losing the game by a little bit more than 2 shots. As chairman, as chair of this body, and also the coach of the pastors and politicians, I am on a losing streak, and I believe it may be time to change your coach. I would not be offended. But nonetheless, it was a good time had by all, and I believe this was also aired on TV 13 for all to see. Nonetheless, I congratulate Apostle Reed for a job well done. Someone says rematch. I'm not sure that would make a difference. Be thankful, though, that we had the member for Pinewood on our team, and he held up his end of the bargain. Yes, I believe he did. Secondly, we are delighted to have so many wonderful Bahamians and visitors in our gallery this morning, and I couldn't help but noted the distinguished Commission on Constitutional Commission, led by its chairman, the QC, Sean McQueenie, and the commissioners. We welcome you to this historic event today. And we have some young people. And to do the honors to introduce them to you, I'd like to call on the member for Nassau Village and Deputy Speaker to now take the floor and introduce his special guest. The chair recognizes the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to all. Mr. Speaker, this morning I have a large group of students, summer students that is, visiting with us in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, before I go on to introduce them, I just would like to give thanks to God for being here today and for giving me the strength and courage to do what I'm doing in Nassau Village, similar to what we're doing here today with this summer camp with the children. So, Mr. Speaker, what we decided to do in Nassau Village after we had a vacation Bible school summer camp, we decided, Mr. Speaker, to continue that, as some of the children were asking for more and what was left to do before the summer ended. So, Mr. Speaker, who we have visiting with us this morning are the Nassau Village summer camp recruits. And I would just like for you all to welcome them with us this morning. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank the teachers and all of the assistant teachers who have organized them. As you can see, it is a very large group, but they're sitting very orderly and very excited for what is to come next. Mr. Speaker, I would wish to single out one of the assistant teachers, Mr. Lamar Matthews. He's well known within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but especially in Nassau Village. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to congratulate him. Most recently, he was elected as the Public Relations Officer of the Progressive Young Liberals. Mr. Speaker, I also would like to thank all those who lended a hand, especially my sponsors, for helping to put on this summer camp. I also wish to just briefly apologize because there was more children that we could not accept. Simply, Mr. Speaker, because we were already full, or perhaps their kids may have been too young. But I don't want them to worry because this program we intend to turn into an after-school program. And eventually, Mr. Speaker, we look forward to assisting as many persons as we can for as long as we can. So as the Deputy Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I thought it was fitting to bring them here to Parliament and to visit with us. During this camp, we propose to instill the spirit of Bahamian identity into the children. The theme of our summer camp, Mr. Speaker, is get involved as we move forward, upward, and onward together. We will use various teaching methods, Mr. Speaker, to convey our camp's message. And we also look to put on different forms of cultural entertainment. The goal, Mr. Speaker, is to provide meaningful activities that will engage the children with a view to enhance their lives. At the end of the camp, Mr. Speaker, we hope that the children would have a better understanding for the pros and the cons of their immediate environment around them. And as we know, Mr. Speaker, it is not an easy task growing up in the area of my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I hope that they will be motivated to set goals and plans to achieve them. We also hope that they will be more disciplined and appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the need for respect for others. I hope and trust, Mr. Speaker, as I speak to them this morning, that they will be left encouraged to make positive life decisions and engage in positive activities that will greatly improve their chances for success. Mr. Speaker, additionally, I also wish to recognize my wife, my daughter, Aubrey, and also my mother and niece who are visiting with us this morning. Mr. Speaker, I choose today to congratulate, Mr. Speaker, my son, Dion, I guess he can also be called Dynamite Duke Smith, the second. Mr. Speaker, Dion, during his term at Queens College this semester, he got a 4.0 on his GPA report card, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, not only do I want to congratulate him and say to him how proud of him I am, Mr. Speaker, I want others to look to him as motivation and encouragement so that they too can achieve higher grades during their school term, Mr. Speaker. But Dion, I'm so proud of you. Keep up the good work. Mr. Speaker, before I end, there's just two brief little stories I want to mention to you as it relates to me and my son. Mr. Speaker, one day my son told me, he said, Dad, he said, if you're an MP and one day I become the PM, that means I would be your boss, correct? So I said, yes, sir, that is correct. I said, but I want you to remember one thing. You may have the power, but I will always have the influence as your father. Mr. Speaker, the second story was, one day I woke up, Mr. Speaker, and I found this note, Mr. Speaker, stuck to my door. And he said, Dear Daddy, he said, look up the car Lamborghini Siesto Elemento. That is the car that I want for my 16th birthday. He said, don't forget it. He said, P.S., I really want it. So, Mr. Speaker, I put a note to the bottom of it, and I returned it to him. I said, okay, if you get the top grade, son, I will. And from the look of his report car this year, Mr. Speaker, I think I'm going to start saving for that Lamborghini. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity, and may God continue to bless you and each and every member in the House. I ask God to also bless my summer camp students, and may God bless the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and congratulations, young people, for coming this morning. And young Dion, congratulations. You got your brains from your mother. Just kidding. Honorable members, on a very solemn note, we have experienced the passing of a giant, the Bahamian icon, recently, and somewhat suddenly. Edmund Spencer Moxey, a former parliamentarian, he was parliamentary secretary and former member of parliament for over at least 10 years, has passed away, and the chair would like at this time for us to pause, as we believe it is fitting to pay tribute to him in his passing, and of course to bring comfort to his family in their time of bereavement. So the chair at this time would entertain a member from the official opposition, followed by a member from the governing side, to pay tribute to our fallen hero. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I pay tribute to such an outstanding gentleman, Mr. Edmund Moxey, I would like to remind those in the audience, especially from Nassau Village, that I too have some relationship with Nassau Village. You see, Mr. Speaker, the first home in Nassau Village was my aunt's, and I used to spend quite a lot of time there in Nassau Village, after which my uncle subsequently developed a block factory and some fishing depot, again, which encouraged me to spend a lot of time. And those in Nassau Village would know that Glen Wells, the round home, subsequently came later. So, Mr. Speaker, I've said on numerous occasions that I have lived essentially in almost all, as we would call in Bahamian terminologies, ghetto areas within New Providence, except that in Camp Road. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted on behalf of the Free National Movement to give tribute and condolence to an outstanding FNM warrior, Mr. Edmund Moxey. He was an MCM for the Free National Movement, Mr. Speaker, and he was also former member of Parliament for Coconut Grove. Edmund Moxey, Mr. Speaker, would be considered as one of the greatest member of Parliament of his time. He represented his constituency well. At that time, I too lived in Coconut Grove, and therefore he was my representative. But what I knew about Edmund Moxey while growing up in the Grove, Mr. Speaker, is that he fought especially for the poor, because he tried his best to eradicate poverty and elevate and uplift those who belonged to that group. And he also fought especially to expand the middle class. And, Mr. Speaker, that was why he had the great dream and vision of the establishment of Jumbe Village. Some would say that he was ahead of his time, but I would not say that he was ahead of his time, Mr. Speaker. I would say that he was a true leader and a visionary. You see, Edmund Moxey realized that during that time there was the drum beat located on Nassau and Fleming Street, and Market and Fleming Street. And there were numerous, if not hundreds, of tourists from time to time who walked over the hill to the Drumbeat nightclub. And during their visit there, Mr. Speaker, a community developed, which meant that encouraged and assist in the development and economic growth of the over-the-hill area. And that was the same concept Edmund Moxey had with respect to Jumbe Village. He wanted to create a village where tourists and others alike can come, and that would help to stimulate and boost the economy for the over-the-hill community, and that the cultural village could become one of the #1 tourist attraction, because tourism, Mr. Speaker, was our #1 industry, and that village could become #1 tourist attraction, subsequently expanding the growth and development of the over-the-hill community. And being a member of that constituency, Mr. Speaker, I remembered very well visiting Jumbe village, where we would visit and play with goats of different types, chickens of different types, various different animals, and vendors with different paraphernalias and different arts and crafts that they displayed. And as kids, we had a wonderful time there at Jumbe village. And then he also was responsible for the community center there in the Grove also, Mr. Speaker. And again, I remembered as a little boy participating, because he believed in community building and the community getting involved in building and expanding its community. And as a boy, I remembered participating in the construction development of the community center. But, Mr. Speaker, Edmund Moxey was very disappointed in 1973-74 when he recognized that there was no money within the budget for the expansion of the Jumbe village. And subsequently, he commenced a one-man demonstration and was immediately fired as parliamentary secretary under the PLP government. But in 1977, he ran as an independent candidate. And in 82, he ran as an FNM candidate. Mr. Speaker, many would not know the problems Edmund Moxey experienced after his departure from the PLP. But, Mr. Speaker, I remembered that it was very difficult for him to obtain a job. And in fact, as a musician who was very good at the piano, he would have been offered numerous jobs in various different hotels. And every time the then government heard that he was given a job in any hotel, he was immediately dismissed or fired. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, Edmund Moxey had a very difficult time finding jobs. His kids underwent the same type of stress, in that I remembered again the same problems in 77 and 79 that they would have undergone. But, Mr. Speaker, what is unique? Edmund Moxey and I developed a relationship, and we spoke almost every morning. And many times before I came to Parliament, he would advise me on how to approach a particular matter and how to strategize moving forward. But the one thing he always wanted was for the Jumbe village, the cultural concept, to continue, expand, and be redeveloped. Because he still felt within his heart, and I feel similarly, Mr. Speaker, that a cultural village in the over-the-hill community would do a lot for the upliftment of our community. And we spoke quite a bit about that. And I know that my last words to him would have been that he can be rest assured that if the present government did not develop a cultural village with the inclusion of Jonkanu and others, then the FNM, when we return to office, would certainly develop and expand that dream. But, Mr. Speaker, like Edmund Moxey, I too have a passion, especially for the poor and the middle class, and has made a commitment that I would do all like him possible to expand the middle class and eradicate as much as possible poverty. So on behalf of the Free National Movement, my wife, officers and members of the Free National Movement, I extend condolence to Mr. Moxey and his entire family, and I say to his wife and kids that I and many others understood understand and recognize what he went through. And he made a great sacrifice for this country, and the country that he would have seen yesterday is a better country today and will be an even better and stronger country as we move forward. Mr. Speaker, may he rest in peace.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further tributes? The Chair recognizes the Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I speak on behalf of this side of the House with respect to the passing of Edmund Moxey, who, by any definition, is a true patriot of our country. Just before doing so, and since I see the member for Montague in the House, I would just wish to, on behalf of those of us on this side who may not have had the opportunity to extend condolences to the member on the passing of his mother, that I would wish to do that again. I am sure whenever he tells the story of his mom, he would tell a story of a lady who God graced with a life that was very long and enriching to herself and to those whose presence she blessed. He has many stories that he shared about his mom, her longevity and acuity of mind as she got deeper into old age. And so I know that really he has been very close over the many years that I have known the member, like his siblings to his mother. And therefore, on behalf of colleagues on this side, we wish you the very best, and we extend our condolences to you. Mr. Speaker, it is not often that those of us who were not born in the 40s and 50s and even the 60s have a sense of what it was like to be motivated to go into politics. The Bahamas in the 50s and 60s was a country that was spawning political leaders who were committed to a march of freedom throughout the country. Men distinguished themselves by being able to, at a point in history, make a decision towards becoming an activist and a warrior in the fight for freedom, as they see it. Edmund Moxey came from a remote settlement in Ragged Island, Duncan Town, at a time when he aspired to be a wireless operator. To be able to do that, obviously one had to understand and communicate with Morse code, the rest of it. But he moved from Ragged Island as a wireless operator to Crooked Island, to Cooperstown and Abaco. And as he moved around, he was moving around in a Bahamas that helped to shape his own dimension for the political road ahead. He was able to see in a very intimate way the extent to which children were without the opportunities for education, where they had to leave school at an early age to help their parents or themselves just to be able to live, to see the lack of modernization as he moved around in these islands. And when he came to New Providence, he became a fearless advocate for the causes he believed in. At a very young age, Ed Moxey came across me. It's a personal story that I have not shared with many people. But I was the youngest member, a person, and I don't even call it member, but in attendance at the meetings of the National Committee for Positive Action. This was an activist group, think tank group of the Progressive Liberal Party, as it began to shape and fashion a fight for majority rule. Ed Moxie took me and Lionel Carey to those meetings from the Valley, and I will never forget rubbing shoulders with persons like the young activists of their times, Arthur Folks and I.G. Stubbs, and persons like that who were part of this thrust to ensure that the ground and the infrastructure was prepared for the march forward to majority rule. Ed Moxie was one of the young activists of his time who was fearless, who had a strong point of view. But he also had another dimension. He was very talented in terms of the arts, in terms of music. He was a great musician. But again, that was a part of his heritage, music. And he distinguished himself as a musician. He was elected in 1967 as a part of that group that brought about majority rule. And again, there are very few now left. A.D. Hyde, secretary. His groundings led him to promote culture, who we are, how we can flourish in our culture. And he was a great promoter of the indigenous flavor, and that's what spawned Jumbay Village and his commitment for it. And we noted what the leader of the opposition has said with respect to it, and we have no disagreement with what he said about Mr. Moxie with respect to describing the suffering he may have undergone as a result of his own decisions politically. It is, Mr. Speaker, what it is when it comes to the history of our country. And there are men and women who made decisions that separated them from the governing party at the time. And they lived with those decisions. And when we look back at the decisions and the consequences of the decision, we simply have to recognize what has happened and to know, Mr. Speaker, that everything that happened in the past is a learning experience that should guide us as we move into the future. Hence, I have no disagreement with the leader of the opposition as he projected the Bahamas to a point where, as we go into our future, things will become better and better. Mr. Speaker, I therefore would wish to recognize the major contribution Ed Moxie made to our country, to the civilization that we call the Bahamas. I would like to thank him for the historic role he played in augmenting the fight for majority rule. I would want to applaud his nationalism and that fierce spirit that he had that triumphed over all of his adversities. And I finally would wish, on behalf of the Progressive Liberal Party, to extend to his widow, to his family, his daughters, children, our deepest sympathy, and to indicate to the House that the Secretary of the Cabinet should be in touch with the family with respect to determining the family's wishes on to what he is entitled to, Mr. Speaker, state-recognized funeral, if it is their wish for that to take place. And so it's really on behalf of the government that I extend our condolences to the family and to applaud Ed Moxie for a life well lived.
Thank you, Right Honorable Member. Just in closing the matter, the Chair would just like to add this notable. Mr. Moxie was a member of the House Select Committee which was appointed to consider the feasibility of moving one of the Junkanoo parades from Bay Street to Wolf Road. Because of Mr. Moxie's persuasion and influence, the committee eventually recommended that the 1976 New Year's Day Junkanoo parade be held in the area of Blue Hill Road and Bahama Avenue, ending up around Jumbay Village. So he was a tremendous, tremendous visionary, certainly a man who will be missed. He's survived by his wife Sylvia, sons Pastor Mario, Marlon, Deborah, Marva, Sharon, and Hope. We salute this iconic Bahamian gentleman for his vision for social, cultural, and economic transformation. I would like all persons under the sound of my voice to stand now for a minute of silence in honor of this Bahamian giant. Thank you, honorable members. May he rest in peace. Now to the business at hand. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Industries Encouragement Approved Product, Easy Trailers Order 2014, and the Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer, Easy Trailers Order 2014.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the documents be brought up. And order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Isle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The City of Nassau Revitalization Extension of Time Order 2014. The Family Island Development Encouragement Extension of Time Order 2014. The Passenger Tax Amendment to First Schedule Order 2014, and the Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Regulations 2014.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Thank you, honorable member. Statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the right honorable member for Centerville.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning, the very not usual, as opposed to unusual, sequence will take place with respect to communications with your permission. And that is that the Prime Minister will make a communication with the view that the Leader of the Opposition will follow. And, Mr. Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise to foreshadow the introduction and first reading later this morning of 4 separate bills to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas. These 4 bills, representing the first round of constitutional reform, are bound together by a common thread: the need to institute full equality between men and women in matters of citizenship, and, more broadly, to eliminate discrimination in the Bahamas based on sex. It will be recalled that the Constitutional Commission, in its report last year, made specific recommendations concerning this matter. The Commission has now presented to Cabinet, and Cabinet has approved the 4 bills that will be introduced in the Honorable House this morning. The government wishes to record its gratitude to the Constitutional Commission under the chairmanship of Sean McQueenie QC for its work in overseeing the preparation of the bills with the technical support of the Attorney General's Office and the Law Reform Commission, and for the ongoing role the Commission has agreed to play in relation to constitutional reform, particularly in relation to public education. In this latter regard, I have been informed by Chairman McQueenie that retired Supreme Court Justice Ruby Nottis, supported by other members of the Constitutional Commission, has agreed to spearhead the public education campaign that will begin very shortly. The government also wishes to place on record its appreciation of the entirely constructive and commendably statesmanlike contribution the opposition has made to the preparation and finalization of the bills that will be introduced today. In this regard, I would especially like to commend the Leader of the Opposition and Member of Parliament for Kalani, Dr. Minnis, and Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel. Mr. Speaker, this kind of bipartisanship on matters of high constitutional principle augurs well for the ongoing maturation of our democracy. It is the government's intention, subject to further consultations with the opposition, to have the 4 constitutional bills debated and passed in both houses of Parliament in the shortest possible time, so as to maximize the time available for discussion and dialogue throughout the country in advance of a national constitutional referendum to be held on the 6th of November 2014. Mr. Speaker, members are aware, of course, that under the Constitution, the 4 bills in question must, in each instance, be approved by at least 3/4 of the members of Assembly, House of Assembly. The bills must then go to the Senate, where they must also be approved by 3/4 of the members of that legislative body. Following passage in the Senate, the bills must be approved by a simple majority of voters in a national referendum. Only after going through the entire process can the Constitution be altered. Mr. Speaker, although I shall have more to say on the bills on a later occasion, I should like to give just a brief snapshot of what each bill essentially says so that the public can be guided accordingly. Bill number 1, the Bahamas Constitution Amendment Bill 2014. This bill seeks to achieve gender equality in a very important respect. It seeks to give a child born outside the Bahamas to a Bahamian-born mother and a non-Bahamian father the same automatic right to Bahamian citizenship that the Constitution already gives to a child born outside the Bahamas to a Bahamian-born father and a non-Bahamian mother. The bill is therefore simply equalizing the sexes and in so doing eliminating an area of discrimination against women that has persisted for the past 41 years. It is important to emphasize, however, that in keeping with the present Constitution, the right to automatically pass Bahamian citizenship to one's child will continue to operate only where the Bahamian parent is himself or herself a native-born Bahamian. This will not change under this amendment. It should also be noted that this change in the Constitution, if approved, will not operate retroactively. However, I wish to announce that my government will, as a matter of administrative policy, grant Bahamian citizenship to all applicants born abroad after July 1973 and before the law changes, to a Bahamian-born mother and non-Bahamian father, subject, of course, to the exceptions and in accordance with the procedures already prescribed by law. Bill number 2, the Bahamas Constitution Amendment number 2, Bill 2014. Bill number 2 also seeks to achieve gender equality in another respect under the Constitution. It seeks to enable a Bahamian woman who marries a foreign man to secure for him the same access to Bahamian citizenship that a Bahamian man has always enjoyed under the Constitution in relation to his foreign spouse. In short, the bill seeks to achieve gender equality in this regard. But, Mr. Speaker, I hasten to add, however, that this bill contains provisions that are designed to ensure that foreign persons, be they male or female, who enter into bogus marriages with Bahamian citizens will not be assisted by this constitutional change. More specifically, a foreign spouse who wishes to acquire Bahamian citizenship based on his or her marriage to a Bahamian citizen will not be able to avail himself or herself of the constitutional change if he or she is no longer married to a Bahamian, or if he or she is married but has no intention of living with the Bahamian spouse, or if it can be shown that the foreign spouse only married the Bahamian in the first place in order to access Bahamian citizenship. In all these cases, Bahamian citizenship applications will be denied. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this is consistent with existing policy and will therefore not come as any great surprise. I shall also mention that in common with the other three bills, this bill will not apply retroactively. Bill number 3, the Bahamas Constitution Amendment number 3, Bill 2014. Bill number 3 is of particular interest because it seeks to remediate the one area of the Constitution that discriminates against men. At present, an unwed Bahamian father cannot pass his citizenship to a child born to a foreign woman. This bill seeks to change that. It will give an unwed Bahamian father the same right to pass citizenship to his child that a Bahamian woman has had or has always had under the Constitution in relation to a child born to her out of wedlock. This bill, however, will require proof of paternity by one or other of the methods prescribed by law. I should also mention that a bill for a short consequential amendment to the Status of Children Act has also been prepared and will be tabled either later today or at the next meeting of the House, sitting of the House. However, this bill will not be brought into force unless or until Bill number 3 completes its passage through both houses, followed by approval in a referendum. Bill number 4, the Bahamas Constitution Amendment number 4, Bill 2014. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Bill number 4 seeks to end discrimination based on sex. This involves the insertion of the word sex in Article 26 of the Constitution so as to make it unconstitutional to discriminate based on whether someone is male or female. It is for me to caution, however, that this bill makes it clear that the existing exceptions will continue to apply. In particular, this bill will not make same-sex marriages lawful. Such unions are already treated as void under the Matrimonial Causes Act, and the genesis of this particular legal position predates the Independence Constitution. This will not change under the proposed amendments to Article 26. Mr. Speaker, before closing, I wish to advise that preliminary preparations are already underway for the Citizenship Commission, recommended by the Constitutional Commission in its report. I expect to be able to announce the members of this commission in the near future. The purpose of this new commission will be to study and definitively address the status of the numerous persons who were born in the Bahamas, albeit to non-Bahamian parents, and who have never known any home other than the Bahamas. As the Constitutional Commission has so sagely warned, we ignore this problem to our peril. The focus for today, however, rightfully rests on the 4 bills that will be tabled very shortly. The changes to the Constitution foreshadowed by these bills will not only help remediate the problem of structural gender inequality and discrimination in our country, but will also assist in bringing greater inclusiveness and cohesion to family structures, while at the same time ensuring that the Bahamas lives up to its international obligations in these matters. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Right Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. The chair will now recognize the Honorable Member for Kalani. Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege for me to rise today in order to add my voice and that of the Free National Movement in expressing pleasure upon the tabling of 4 constitutional amendment bills. That once again this Parliament will be enabled to take a stand in favor of the equality of every Bahamian citizen upon our nation's constitution and the laws of our land. The cardinal principle that every man, every woman, and the child of every Bahamian is endued by our Creator with the inalienable right to expect and to receive equal treatment before the law and under the Constitution has been a guiding principle of the party that I am honored to lead from its inception. I am advised, Mr. Speaker, by those who attended the Independence Conference held in Marlborough House in London in December 1972, that the F&M delegation, which was led by the late Sir Kendall Isaacs, and among whose members was our former Governor General, Sir Arthur Folkes, strongly advocated, even then, that men and women should receive equal treatment in our Constitution. Sadly, as we all know, this did not occur. Yet so profound has been our commitment to the principles of equality for men and women that in the year 2002 we were prepared to stake all. Even our prospects in a rapidly approaching general election in seeking against strong countervailing winds to advance this principle of equality in the national referendum held in February of that year. Today, Mr. Speaker, and my fellow Bahamians, we stand at the beachhead of another effort to secure full constitutional equality for men, women, and children of Bahamians before the law. The success of this effort will require a bold and unified, multi-partisan, and multi-sectoral effort on the part not just of political parties, but of civil society organizations, the Constitutional Commission, as well as social, civic, and religious leaders. I wish, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Constitutional Commission and former Attorney General Sean McQueenie for their and his efforts on behalf of the improvement of our constitutional order, and also Senator Carl Bethel, another former Attorney General, who, even though he demitted his position on the Constitutional Commission after his appointment by me as leader of opposition business in the Senate, has continued, to my knowledge, to offer his advice and support to the Commission behind the scenes. I also thank, Mr. Speaker, retired Supreme Court Justice Ruby Nordich for having agreed, together with the Commission, to spearhead the necessary public education and campaign and consultation. Let me emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that these constitutional bills will require a yes vote in a binding constitutional referendum. Those persons who might feel some way discomfited by events which have followed recent referendum should not be in any way discouraged. This constitutional referendum, Mr. Speaker, will count. The results of this referendum will be important and binding. I therefore urge every Bahamian to play a meaningful role in listening to the parliamentary debate on these bills, reading the bills, attending the educational meetings which will shortly commence, carefully considering the proposals in a nonpartisan and public-spirited manner, and to vote your conscience. Though there is much which divides us in this place, let us speak with one voice when the issue of equality before the law. Let us, Mr. Speaker, speak as one in this place. If we can do so, we will signal to every Bahamian and the watching world our unified commitment to the advancement of human dignity in our beloved Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity on this historic occasion to present this communication. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, and honourable House members, I'm grateful to the good people of the Golden Gates constituency on whose shoulders I stand and whom I have the privilege to serve. Today, Mr. Speaker, I rise to deliver a brief but very important communication to this Parliament on a report compiled by the Department of Statistics on the 2014 Labour Force Survey. This survey, Mr. Speaker, was compiled by the professional staff members of the country's premier authority on data and contains irrefutable evidence of the success of the policies of this Perry Christie-led administration. The survey was conducted during the month of May 2014, and it provides empirical data on the Bahamian labor force that covers the period since the last survey, which was carried out in November 2013. Numbers do not lie, Mr. Speaker. And the Bahamas is indeed on course and moving in the right direction. In just over 2 years, Mr. Speaker, the survey confirms that more than 8,000 jobs have been created as a direct result of the proactive and innovative policies of the PLP government. Mr. Speaker, the labor force has increased over the years and now stands at 197,335 persons, up from 188,310 in May of 2012, and supports the fact that there's an increase in the number of employed persons and a decrease in the number of unemployment and the unemployment rate, which now stands at 14.3%. which is much lower than it was when we took office in May of 2012. In November 2013, the unemployment rate was 15.4%. Of particular note, Mr. Speaker, is the significant reduction in the number of discouraged workers, especially on the island of Grand Bahama, where this number has decreased, Mr. Speaker, by 60%. This new spirit of enthusiasm in Grand Bahama is directly related to the focused leadership and the ongoing initiatives of the government, including the opening of the Memories Resort, the excellent working relationship with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Hutchison Group, and the ongoing consultations with our social partners to improve the economy of the Bahamas. Bahamians from all walks of life throughout the length and breadth of the Bahamas have hope and strong confidence in this government's economic policies as the right formula at the right time to put our country back on track and on a path to economic revival. Both New Providence and Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, experienced decreases in their unemployment rates. In the case of New Providence, the rate is 15%, and in Grand Bahama, 14.7%. As stated earlier, Mr. Speaker, discouraged workers in the country fell from 6,765 in November 2013 to 4,880 in May 2014, representing a decrease of some 1,905 or 28%. Both New Providence and Grand Bahama experienced a decline in the number of discouraged workers from 3,335 to 2,920, down by some 475 or 14% in the former, and from 1,915 to 760, representing a decrease of 1,155 or 60% in the latter. These downward trends are significant, Mr. Speaker, because they amply demonstrate that many Bahamians who are available to work are finding and keeping jobs. Our economy is rebounding, and the job creation agenda of the Perry Christie-led government is now bearing fruits. As the Minister of Labor and National Insurance, I want to also speak to the contributions of the National Training Agency and the Department of Labor have made respectively in reducing the levels of unemployment in the country. One of the functions of the National Training Agency, Mr. Speaker, is to devise and implement strategies and actions that would positively affect the overall employment rate among youth between the ages of 15 to 24. According to the survey, unemployment among this group is considerably higher than any age group and stands at some 28%. The National Training Agency has devised an industry standards-driven competency-based training program to address the lack of skills, soft and practical, among this at-risk grouping. This program, comprising training provider-based learning and internships, has been most successful and effective. And since the establishment and launch of the National Training Agency on July 15, 2013, the challenge of decreasing the unemployment statistics relating to youth has been the primary focus of this agency. The agency targets youth and young adults between the ages of 15 to 26, and in considered instances make accommodation for young adults up to age 29. This survey indicates that unemployment among this target group decreased by some 4 percentage points, decreasing from 32% to 28% over the 6-month period. The activities of the National Training Agency has undoubtedly contributed to this decline in unemployment, as during this period, August to December 2013, the agency trained over 450 youth and young adults in New Providence and found full-time jobs for well over 100 of its trainees. Based on feedback obtained from these trainees, it can be conservatively estimated that another 50 to 60 trainees found jobs on their own initiative. The average wage paid to these trainees is between $220 to $260 per week. Annually, this reflects almost $2 million that will be circulated in the economy. The National Training Agency's second cohort of 170 New Providence trainees recently completed their prescribed period of training, and the first Grand Bahama cohort of over 150 trainees will complete their training in another week, which will bring the number of persons trained by the National Training Agency to over 800 young Bahamian adults. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the National Training Agency is also proud of the relationship we have established with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. As a requirement for the standardized high school diploma, which will be introduced in high schools this September for all grade 10 students, students will be required to have 20 hours of job readiness training as a prerequisite to graduation. The National Training Agency has established the modules and the training program that will be necessary for our trained teachers to manage the supervision of the National Training Agency. Mr. Speaker, the work of the staff of the Department of Labor in general and in Employment Exchange in particular should be highlighted and commended. The countless interviews that would have been scheduled for unemployed persons in New Providence and Grand Bahama, resulting in over 500 workers that are now working in Bimini as a direct result of the job fairs sponsored by the Department of Labor in conjunction with Bimini World Resorts. The push for employers to identify and hire more qualified Bahamians to fill...
Honorable members, you could bring your voices down.
In addition, there are structured meetings designed to ensure that there's a constant flow of information between developers and the Department of Labor, and when necessary, the terms of the respective heads of agreements are adhered to by all stakeholders. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, during the past months, meetings have been held with Kersner, Bahama, Sandals, Albany, Bakers Bay, Scotiabank, CIBC First Caribbean Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Scotia Trust, Grand Bahama Shipyard, and Bimini World Resorts. In the upcoming months, my ministry expects to add to this list of companies Club Med, Breezes Super Clubs, Life Key Club, the Cove Resort and Grey Cliff, Columbus Fishing and Spa, Santa Maria Estates, all in an effort to ensure that the best possible balance is accomplished between the request for expatriate assistance and the need for more Bahamians to be afforded opportunities to provide for themselves and their families. These are just some of the examples of the work done by the staff of the Ministry of Labor and National Insurance, and hence more than 8,000 Bahamians are working today that were not working prior to May 2014. Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight the collaborative efforts of both the Director of Immigration and the Director of Labor, who have developed an excellent working relationship regarding the issuance of labor certificates and work permits, and working with great efficiency to enforce the provisions of the Immigration Act. Mr. Speaker, I want, on behalf of the Prime Minister and the people of the Bahamas, to thank the Director of Statistics and the hard-working and dedicated staff of the Department of Statistics for an excellent and comprehensive report. In the run-up to the 2012 general elections, our Deputy Prime Minister Davis promised that the government will create 10,000 jobs. And in just over 2 years, we are well on track and headed in the right direction. I submit, Mr. Speaker, that when this survey is conducted in 2015, the numbers, Mr. Speaker, will be off the chain. With the forward-looking policies of this PLP government and the plans that are on the drawing board, I have no doubt that Bahamians can, in the very near future, look forward to further decreases in the rate of unemployment, and more jobs will be created. Mr. Speaker, while there may be some who wish us to fail for whatever reason, I believe that every patriotic Bahamian knows that whenever any government succeeds in providing better for its people, then the entire country benefits. Yes. As the external optimist, Mr. Speaker, I believe there are many patriotic Bahamians that want us to succeed. The Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker, believe in our leader, the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, and he will not disappoint them. I too share the expressed optimism and believe in my heart that better days are indeed ahead for the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to deliver this communication, which will foreshadow the tabling and the reading for the first time of a bill that will be referred to as the Value-Added Tax Bill. Mr. Speaker, the tabling of this bill in this honorable House is an historic moment in the history of our nation. Following many years of study and discussion, at times heated and contentious, we are finally taking up the challenge and shouldering the responsibility of bringing our system of taxation up to the proper and appropriate standards of the 21st century. Before getting into the details of our tax reform program, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a few moments initially to provide some background information on the context in which this reform has been developed. For it is clearly the case that the proposed reform of our taxation system is but one, though essential and critical component of the government's broader agenda of economic and fiscal reform and modernization, the overall objective of which is to promote economic growth and the creation of opportunities for Bahamians. Indeed, I would remind honorable members that we were elected by Bahamian citizens to implement our proposed program of fundamental change in order to develop a stronger and more prosperous Bahamas for the future. We fully recognize that the challenges that confront us are numerous and complex. Our plan of action is commensurate with those challenges. It offers new and innovative solutions for the wide range of economic and social challenges facing our nation. Mr. Speaker, we simply cannot afford to continue with business as usual. Fiscal reform is thus critical. As many within and outside this country have acknowledged, our taxation structure is clearly outdated and inadequate for the needs of a modern government. Taxes and duties on international trade in the form of import and export duties, excise taxes, stamp duties, and tourism taxes constitute some 60% of total government recurrent revenue. Unlike most countries, we do not impose personal or corporate income taxes, nor do we have a broad-based consumption tax. In essence, the government's revenue base is excessively narrow and suited to another era when the economy was far less complex. The economy of today is, as in most advanced societies, heavily oriented to the provision of services, but our tax structure is simply out of tune with that reality. By predominantly focusing on goods, our taxation system is also decidedly unfair, as the burden of taxes is not shared equitably by citizens of varying means. Reform of the tax system and its administrative apparatus have been talked about in this country for a number of years, but follow-up has been sporadic and unfocused. The time has come now for decisive action. Important reforms are now underway to improve the administration of existing taxes. Comprehensive programs are in place to effect the modernization of both the Customs Department and the Real Property Tax Office to bring their operations up to the standards of best international practice. We are also phasing in the establishment of a new Central Revenue Administration to consolidate the collection of a number of taxes and fees in a more efficient and effective manner. The proposals for a fundamental reform of our tax structure, including the introduction of a value-added tax, which appeared in the white paper of last year, are another important element of our program of change. We are confident that when fully implemented, they will result in stronger growth of our economy and more job opportunities for our citizens. We fervently believe that a reformed tax system will provide for more equitable taxation. Just as importantly, the new structure will secure adequate revenues for the effective administration of government and the pursuit of our key economic and social objectives. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, the subject of fiscal reform has been under review and discussion in the Bahamas for a very long time and across administrations. In the process, we have benefited from the experience of numerous other nations around the world that have reformed their systems over the past decades, as well as from an extensive international academic literature on the benefits and key desirable features of a value-added tax. Senior staff and advisors at the Ministry of Finance have also honed our reform proposal on the basis of in-house research and visits to other nations in the region. After carefully considering the vast amount of information at its disposal and the range of potential new revenue options, the government has decided that a broad-based consumption tax in the form of a value-added tax is the most suitable option to enhance the revenue yield of our system. Having said that, I will stress again that beyond its desire to address revenue needs, the government is fully mindful of the potential effect on lower-income Bahamians and is committed to mitigating the impact of our reform program on the most needy in society through the financial enhancement of its various social assistance programs. This is a practice that has been adopted in other countries that have introduced the VAT, and it is one that we believe is most appropriate in the Bahamian context. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the government of the Bahamas is reviewing its entire system of consumer protection to ensure that unscrupulous individuals do not use the process of tax reform as an excuse to adopt predatory pricing practices. The government is fully committed to enhancing these protections, whether through additional legislative measures and through the provision of additional resources. Mr. Speaker, the other revenue enhancement options that were considered as a central element of tax reform include an income tax, payroll taxes, and a sales tax. Research has found that income taxes are clearly more detrimental to economic growth than a value-added tax. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has reviewed over 90 studies in this area and concluded that the principal drawback of the personal income tax is that it acts as a disincentive to work effort, innovation, and entrepreneurship. It also discourages savings, as interest income, dividends, and capital gains are subject to taxation. Likewise, the corporate income tax on profits discourages investments and innovation. The study by the OECD, Mr. Speaker, produced a ranking of tax instruments in terms of their growth friendliness. Property taxes and consumption taxes, such as VAT, are the most growth friendly. Personal income taxes are significantly inferior, while corporate income taxes have the most negative effects on GDP growth per capita. These negative effects, of course, grow in magnitude with the degree of progressivity of the income tax. As such, it is clear that income tax works at a cross purposes to one of the major goals of tax reform, and that is promoting a stronger economy and job creation. A VAT as a tax on consumption does not deter work effort and entrepreneurship, nor does it discourage investment and innovation. It also encourages savings, which in turn supports enhanced investment in the domestic economy. The imposition of a tax on income can also lead to an onerous compliance burden for individual taxpayers. Employers, for their part, must withhold income taxes from the monthly wages and salaries of employees and then remit these to the government. Individuals must then file an annual tax return declaring income from all sources and submitting all receipts required to support claims for whatever deductions are permitted. Private sector enterprises must do the same in respect of corporate income taxes. Mr. Speaker, the May budget communication contained a review of the evolution of the tax reform proposal since the release of the white paper. I will briefly return to the key points in that evolution at this time, as I believe that it's important to a full understanding of how we arrived at the specific elements of the current proposals. That in turn will be useful for the promotion of an enlightened debate on the bills that we will have before us. Mr. Speaker, the public launch of the tax reform process began with the release of the white paper on tax reform in early 2013. Public discussions began around the white paper in both New Providence and the Family Islands. These then intensified to include the business community, churches, schools, community and civic groups, and audiences within the public sector. From the private sector, the Ministry of Finance also enlisted key business groups and the Christian Council to form part of an advisory committee for implementation of the proposed reforms to the tax system to ensure that alongside the one-on-one consultations, Mr. Speaker, the views of industry were being constantly channeled to the government. Following the release of the white paper, the Ministry of Finance engaged in a process of drafting the legislation and regulations, which formed the basis of more in-depth consultations upon their release last November. With the release of the draft legislation, the Ministry of Finance received significant feedback from private stakeholder groups. In addition, there has been increasing outreach to the Family Islands. The full range of these meetings and discussions has led to significant clarifications and, in many cases, positive responses to the proposals put forward by stakeholders in the private sector. As the Minister of Finance stressed in May, our reform deliberations have also been usefully instructed by advice received from the team of New Zealand experts that visited our country. These experts had discussions with a wide range of stakeholders as well as with officials and ministers. Through this process, they outlined what made their fiscal reform process in New Zealand so successful and offered observations and recommendations to us. As these inputs have proven critical to the evolution of our reform proposal, I will review them briefly at this juncture. The success of the New Zealand VAT, and there are important lessons for us here, Mr. Speaker, was very largely due to, one, an extensive education program aimed at both the business sector and the wider public, with the program largely driven by respected members of the private sector. Secondly, a government commitment to minimize the compliance costs involved with the new tax, particularly by having virtually no exemptions. And thirdly, a government commitment to offset the effect of VAT on the cost of living by reducing income taxes, and for families not paying income tax, introducing a form of negative income tax or conditional cash transfer system. As was explained in the budget communication, the government has accepted the New Zealand recommendation to enlist the private sector in the public education campaign. A 3-person task force will oversee this process and will be tasked to assist in explaining the reform process to the business community and the wider public. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I will now briefly review some key features of the bills. There will be one single VAT rate across the board that has been substantially reduced to 7.5% from the originally proposed 15%. We judge the lower rate to be desirable from both an economic and social perspective. Of course, a lower rate will yield somewhat less revenue than we had originally expected, and as such, across-the-board reductions in tariffs and excises will not be feasible. There will, however, be selective reductions in certain areas, and at the time of first reading, Mr. Speaker, I will also request first reading of amendments to the Tariff and Excise Act to reflect the reduction in those tariff and excise rates. Along with the significantly reduced rate, the list of exemptions has been pared substantially. Specifically, no goods will be exempted, and as for services, the list of exemptions has been tightened to include only the following: financial services, i.e. credit and deposit savings products. This covers all forms of lending and savings products issued by banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions. The sale or rental of a dwelling, education services, specifically explicit tuition-funded courses in preschool, primary and secondary school, and in programs of study leading to the award of graduate or undergraduate degrees at the tertiary level. The sale of vacant land will be exempt, as will a lease of land to the extent that such land is principally used or is intended for use for accommodation as a dwelling which is erected or will be erected on the land. Also exempted, Mr. Speaker, would be any services by a ministry, department, statutory body, agency, local government council, or any other entity of government in connection with a taxable activity where the consideration for such services is nominal in amount or not intended to recover the cost of such goods or services. Any services rendered by a daycare center, including the provision of after-school care, will be exempt, as will be services provided directly by a facility to persons in need of care, being persons who are aged, indigent, infirm, disabled, or handicapped. Also exempt will be health care, specifically for public services provided to public patients receiving free care at public facilities, including children of school age or younger, the indigent, aged, government employees, and other persons identified by the Minister of Health. Religious services by an institution of religious worship, or also exempt, Mr. Speaker, services by a recognized charity to the extent that such services relate directly to the charitable function of the charity. The registration threshold for VAT will now be at turnover of $100,000 per year. As well, group registration for related groups of companies will be allowed, thus eliminating the need to recognize input and output taxes on intra-group transactions. Mr. Speaker, there will be 3 filing periods for VAT. Businesses with annual taxable sales exceeding $5 million will file monthly. Businesses below that threshold and with taxable sales exceeding $400,000 would be allowed to file quarterly. Other registrants would be allowed to file on a semi-annual basis and use more simplified cash accounting methods when compiling their VAT returns. This cash, rather than accrual basis of accounting among small registrants, will also eliminate working capital concerns over the treatment of bad debts. A simplified VAT return using a flat rate scheme is proposed for businesses with turnover below $400,000, and VAT due to government would be calculated either as a fixed percentage of cash sales with no need to account separately for input taxes paid, or the businesses will be allowed to calculate both input and output taxes on the basis of cash receipts or cash payments. As well, businesses that qualify, including those that currently enjoy fiscal incentives on imports, will be allowed to defer payment of VAT until the return for the respective period is filed. We will also implement less complex procedures for tax credits against bad debts and streamline the refund process, having regard to the need to be vigilant against fraudulent claims. Mr. Speaker, we firmly believe that the legislation that will be read for the first time today sets out a solid, world-class policy and administrative framework for fiscal reform that will be successful in moving our nation to a system of taxation that is both economically efficient and adequate to service the needs of modern governance and to promote economic growth and prosperity. We look forward to a healthy and constructive debate on this bill in the days ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstand. Thank you. Communication by the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to report delivery to the Honourable Senate of message number 31 from the House.
Thank you. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motion to leave of absence, leave to resign, seat on new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Angliston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Marion Bethel, in her poem, "And the Trees Still Stand," says, "We are here because you beat back the bush, because you pitched scalding tar to make that road. You uprooted lignum vitae trees to turn that uncharted road into a journey with landmarks. And because of you, replanted the trees of life. We are here." Mr. Speaker, I rise and I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas. Second. A bill. I'm sorry.
There are 4 bills you're reading. You're moving for the first bill at a time. Let's read the bill in its entirety. Do we have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas.
For the first reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 2.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 2. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, being Bill number 2.
For the first reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 3.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for the first time. A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 3. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 3.
For the first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 4.
Second.
Yeah, I see them.
Ordered that the bill, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for the first time. A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 4. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Bahamas, Bill number 4.
For the first reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Angliston.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: the Status of Children Amendment Bill 2014.
Second.
Ordered that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for the first time. A bill for an act to amend the Status of Children Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Status of Children Act.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles. Very well. Member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for a first time a bill for an act to provide for the imposition, assessment, and collection of value-added tax on the supply and importation of goods and services in the Bahamas and for connected matters.
Do we have a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for the first time. A bill for an act to provide for the imposition, assessment, and collection of value-added tax on the supply and importation of goods and services in the Bahamas and for connected matters. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to provide for the imposition, assessment, and collection of value-added tax on the supply and importation of goods and services in the Bahamas and for connected matters.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Tariff Act.
Second.
Ordered that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Tariff Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Tariff Act.
Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Excise Act.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Isles.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, it's not a first reading, but at some point I would like to lay on the table of the House a copy of the draft value-added tax regulations as well.
Very well.
Just to lay the regulations.
Very well.
The draft is ready.
Order that the documents be brought up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the regulations do lie on the table. Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rise to table compendium of 5 bills related to a new financial services product called the investment condominium. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the Companies Act.
Second.
Order that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Companies Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Companies Act.
Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the International Business Companies Act.
Ordered that the bill be brought up.
Angie.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time, be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the International Business Companies Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the International Business Companies Act.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to facilitate the formation of an investment condominium in the Bahamas between participants for the purpose of collective investments and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to facilitate the formation of an investment condominium in the Bahamas between participants for the purpose of collective investments and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to facilitate the formation of an investment condominium in the Bahamas between participants for the purpose of collective investments and for connected purposes.
Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the Investment Funds Act to provide for the regulation of investment condominium as an investment fund and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Investment Funds Act to provide for the regulation of an investment condominium as an investment fund and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Investment Funds Act to provide for the regulation of an investment condominium as an investment fund and for connected purposes.
Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the Exempted Limited Partnership Act to provide for the conversion of an exempted limited partnership to an investment condominium in the manner provided and for connected purposes. And I got regulation.
Order that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Exempted Limited Partnership Act to provide for the conversion of an exempted limited partnership to an investment condominium in the manner provided for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Exempted Limited Partnership Act to provide for the conversion of an exempted limited partnership to an investment condominium in the manner provided and for connected purposes.
Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would like to lay on the table a draft copy of the Investment Funds Amendment Regulations 2014.
Order that the document be brought up.
Thank you. Yep.
Order that the document do lie on the table. Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, as you can see, we are about to enter a period of frenetic activity as we seek to deal with these most important bills. The bills to amend the Constitution, the VAT, the value-added tax bill, and hopefully the gaming bill, all of which will be rather heavy lifting for us. And the Prime Minister indicated that it is our intention to hold a referendum with respect to the constitutional bills in the first week of November, which means that it's very important for us to deal with the bills here so that the public education can begin and we can successfully explain to the public what it is we are seeking to do, not only for the constitutional amendments, but also for value-added tax bill and in due course the gaming bill. And so our members have been wanting to know when it is that we'll be able to have a summer break. And I've been saying I'm not sure whether it'll be a summer, but we will have a break as soon as we finish these 3 sets of bills. So those who are planning a summer break know, firstly, we need all of our members here for the constitutional bills. All. And that's why I'm so happy that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition have been able to come to an agreement on these very important matters. And so I'm going to move the suspension until the 30th of July, which is a week from today. And I would wish to indicate to my colleagues on both sides of the House that it is then that we intend to begin the debate on the constitutional bill. And I see a variety of looks on the faces, but you know, we were able to do so well when we agreed on the disability bill that I think that you would realize that we could do the same thing on bills
all of the bills
with which we agree.
We are for equality and everything for the women. So yes,
let me ask. Can we do it with the women's bill right now?
Yes.
Say yes. I'm ready now. I'm ready now.
You know, because the song "Yes, Lord, Yes," you know.
Yes.
All right.
They were ready to change the mind on the outside. By acclamation.
Very well, Honorable Member.
Anyway, Mr. Speaker, so I move that the House suspends to Wednesday, 30th of July, 2014.
I changed my mind.
That's all right, yeah. You can go away, but not yet.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until the 30th of July in the year of our Lord, 2014, at 10 a.m. Honorable members, in the middle of the motion, just want to pause and ask all members to remain seated or after the suspension to remain in your places until all of the bills are handed out properly by the staff, the hard-working staff of the House of Assembly. The operative word is hard-working. Yes, the chair recognizes Honorable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, when we commissioned the HMBS Arthur Beyond Hannah, it was after it had been postponed and members complained that they were not made aware of the date when it was commissioned. And so I'd like to inform members that on July 31st, which is a week from tomorrow, it is our intention to commission the HMBS Durwood Knowles, 5 p.m. on the 31st of July at the Kelly Dock, Mr. Speaker. There will be no rain, I prayed.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many as are in favor that we suspend until the 30th of July, 2014. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Motion is passed. We suspend until the 30th of July, 2014.